Welcome back to the Herbalist Hour. Today, I'm really excited to have on Sarah Russo. And Sarah is the author, the creator of this fantastic graphic novel right here. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see the beautiful cover. It's called Herbs for the Apocalypse. And so I'm just really excited to kind of delve into that and some other subjects. But welcome to the show, Sarah.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here.
Welcome to the Herbalist Hour. This is where community gather, merging the power of people and flowers, the sweet and the bitter to the salty, the sour. Umami, it's time for the Herbalist Hour.
Well, let's get things rolling here by asking a little bit about your background. I'm just kind of curious, what were you like as a kiddo? Were you always into plants? And then kind of take us to your herbal journey, if you will.
Great question. So I am originally from Montana, and I'm from Missoula, which is a city. It's not really that big, but in Montana, we would consider it a city. But then I grew up outside of the city, so in the countryside. So I had a river in my backyard. And I grew up around the mountains and nature was surrounding me. And I like to tell people this story to give context that when we were on the playground, we had mountain lions and bobcats coming down. We'd have to go inside. So
Wow.
Nature was very wild where I was. And so I remember growing up, just having the outdoors as my playground. My parents would say, we only got maybe a half an hour of television, and then we had to go outside. We had 3 channels or something. And so I would be outside entertaining myself. So from a young age, I developed a connection to nature. And one of the first plants I remember having a connection with is yarrow. So yarrow was one of those herbs that was growing in the midst of winter even. And if there wasn't snow, you could kind of see it there. And it was always the first to appear. And so that's the one that I always think about a lot. And then as well as pine trees, we had pine trees all around us. And I became interested in herbal medicine very far back. First, kind of what drew me into it actually was essential oils. At the time, my dad was really into essential oils, and I remember smelling all of them and learning about them. And then I remember one time I had a little cold, and I started a bath, put some essential oils in there, and I felt better afterwards. And I remember that was my first aha moment of, wow, that's really cool that they can help me. So then I just started naturally kind of getting into them after that.
Totally. I think I read that you went to Evergreen State College, and I believe that's the one in Olympia, Washington, right?
Yes.
Did you study herbalism there?
So when I was there, Evergreen, for those who may not be familiar with it, is a liberal arts college, and we got to choose our own major. And so at the time, I was focused more on environmental studies, kind of in the broad spectrum. But I did have the ability to do independent research projects. So that was really great. If we could find a faculty sponsor, then we could really focus on whatever we were interested in. So when I transferred. So the first year I was at Evergreen, I went to Costa Rica and studied permaculture. And I took a tropical herbal medicine course while I was there. And that was fascinating, introducing me to that whole world, because obviously the plants that I was familiar with, it was a completely different ballgame down there. And then the year after that, we were looking at the socioeconomic environment at the time during when Chavez was president of Venezuela. And so we got to do an independent research project as well. And my focus was on common medicinal plants of Venezuela. So I actually went to the mercados where they sell different plant medicines. It's super different than we have in other parts of the world, where you go there and you can buy fruit, vegetables, meat, all your produce. And then also they just have these vast array of different herbs in the marketplace. So I would go there and see what they have and talk to people and ask them what they used it for, because I also noticed that some of the uses are very different than maybe we'd have here. Like, for example, down there, comfrey, they use that internally. And I know that here it's kind of, well, in the US anyway, it's kind of a debate whether or not to take it internally or use it only externally. So it was kind of interesting to see those different ways of viewing the same plants.
Totally. Yeah, I don't, it's probably just the circle that I run in, but everybody that I know that went to Evergreen is either into plants or an herbalist or yeah. So definitely. Well, you brought up yarrow. I was going to bring this up later, but yarrow is very prevalent on the cover of Herbs for the Apocalypse, including Sophia's tattoos. She's even holding a yarrow. Can you just tell me or tell us about your relationship with yarrow and why it's so symbolic throughout the graphic novel?
Yeah, so I think that, well, I was thinking about a lot of different herbs when I was creating the graphic novel. And then I started considering what are the herbs for the apocalypse. So if we had to choose X amount of herbs to be on a desert, stranded on a desert island, what would you choose? And of course, yarrow came to me very quickly as one of the options. And I always loved the mythology surrounding yarrow because I think it's really interesting to study the medicinal properties of plants, but almost as interesting to me, if not more interesting, is the folkloric connection, the stories associated with the plants. So yarrow is connected to Greece, and the Trojan warriors would bring it into battle with them. They would wear it kind of as an amulet for protection. And this mirrors modern day connection that we have with it. So for example, flower essences use yarrow to develop energetic boundaries and protect yourself from external influences that you may not want. And so for someone like me, being a sensitive person in the world, that's important and crucial, because for a lot of my life, I just spent it absorbing energy and not even knowing that I had the ability to put up boundaries and to choose whether or not I wanted to absorb other people's energy. So yarrow helped me with that. And then also in the realm of the warrior, I think it's so beautiful to think about it as far as a wound healer, and then it's a great metaphor for life because we go throughout life and we get wounded and then we heal, and just the ability to heal ourselves. So I think that yarrow really speaks to that, as well as its supreme resilience and, growing throughout winter and coming back like a very faithful friend every season. And it's beautiful. And the tiny little flowers as well are just their own little world in of themselves, as well as the leaf and how it looks like a feather to me and always has since I was a kid. And so while I was creating the graphic novel, some of these plants kind of took on their own story and kind of wove themselves into the narrative. And so yarrow became one of those plants that kind of had a thread throughout the story. And yeah, yarrow appears at the beginning. And then as with all of the herbs of the apocalypse in the story, many plants get mentioned in the graphic novel, but there are 10 that are on the cover. And those are the 10 herbs of the apocalypse. And they also each have a monologue. So there is a yarrow monologue. And it was really great because I got different people to actually narrate the herb monologues. And so the woman, Janester Wilson King, who did the voice for yarrow, she was absolutely perfect. And it just really spoke to the essence and the spirit of the plant in a way that even surpassed my expectations. So it was beautiful to work with the plant and develop a deeper relationship through working with it and into the story as well.
Yeah. So if folks want to listen to those monologues, that's on your YouTube channel, correct?
It is correct. Yeah.
Awesome.
So we have all of them there.
Awesome. Yeah. Actually, later on, I was going to read the dandelion one. I really enjoyed that. I was going to ask you, do you yourself have a yarrow tattoo?
I do. I actually have it. I have it on my Achilles heel because Achilles, that was his Achilles heel, was that his mom, it said, the legend has it that his mom dipped him in yarrow tea, and that was the only and she held him by the heel, and that was the only part that was exposed. So that's where the arrow hit him and killed him. And so I put it there many years ago now, just as a reminder of resilience and that, to garner strength.
Love that. Yeah, I want to say yarrow is probably the most tattooed herb, at least that I've seen. I just got this one. I don't know if you could see it. It's a dandelion. Oops.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice.
yeah. I just got that a few days ago. It's still healing.
Oh,
Well,
cool.
yeah. I'm
Yeah,
stoked on it.
I'm due for another herbal tattoo at some point.
What will you get, you think?
Oof. That's a good question. I need to sit with it for a while.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So you did a lot of self-study, it sounds like. Have you had any, say, herbal mentors along the way?
That's a good question. I think it's kind of interesting to consider this question because I've had people that have inspired me along the way, but really
sure.
one of my greatest inspirations and the way I learned the most was actually when I was working at apothecaries and herb shops themselves, and just the kind of trial by fire scenarios and people coming in and asking you questions, and then maybe you were prepared to answer it, maybe you weren't. The kind of themes that run through. So sometimes there would be a trend in a week and everyone would come in wanting Tulsi or something like that. So that was really what inspired me. And so when I was working in the herb shots, I'd also be reading and doing a lot of self-study. And over time, there have been so many that I'm kind of at a loss as far as like who they would be specifically. Because a lot of times I find that some people, teachers and things like that, they kind of come to you and they kind of go in and out of your life.
Totally.
And so I've had that experience. Yeah. And also the plants themselves have been
Amen.
amazing teachers as well.
Well, it sounds like, so you worked at an herb shop. It sounds like Sophia is kind of maybe like a autobiographical in some ways. It sounds like there's a lot of overlap between you and the protagonist of the story.
There is some overlap. It's funny because people ask me that a lot. And I wouldn't say it's completely autobiographical because it's a fiction story and I could invent whatever I wanted.
Right.
So that was great. So I like to say that all the characters are me. Totally. Because it came from my mind, right? So there's a part of me in all of them. Yeah. But Sophia, the character of Sophia, it was a very cathartic process to write this story because actually it started out as a novel and the novel went through 3 drafts. And then initially I was just going to shelve the story completely because being a first-time novelist and then going and getting it edited by a professional editor and having them rip it apart, but not even in a good way, and just trying to copy and paste cookie cutter for the masses and then leaving me with afterwards, I thought, okay, I have really nowhere to go. I feel like the story is not being understood. I feel like people aren't going to get it. What's the point of me putting so much more energy into it? And so I shelved it for a while. And then when I had this idea, almost a year later, I was in the hot springs and I was working with cannabis and I was in the hot springs in Colorado. And just this idea came to me and it was, do it as a graphic novel. And I had never this was the first novel I'd ever written. I'd never written a graphic novel. So I just decided, wow, that's pretty crazy, but I think I'm going to pursue it. And actually it turned out to be the right decision the whole time. And so the process of writing the story as a novel and then later as a graphic novel, it was really therapeutic because there's kind of a part of me growing up and seeing the way that humans treat the earth. And I've never understood how we can completely destroy our collective home. And it used to bring me to this point of total and utter despair. And so the process of writing Herbs for the Apocalypse actually helped me kind of give that part of me a voice. So in a way, that voice of frustration is sort of the character of Sophia. And then I made her own beast as well, because there's a lot of her that isn't me. And it was fun to just make up different aspects of it. That's the beauty of fiction, is that you can be inspired as much from the real world as you want, and then just make up whatever else you care to.
Yeah, no, I was just reading it before our chat. And when I first, before I read it, I was thinking it was going to be like a literal apocalypse. but in some ways it kind of is. But really what it is just, it's modern. It's kind of a modern day story, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, exactly. It was funny because we first released the story chapter by chapter online. And I remember that HerbRally was a big part of helping share the information during that time. So I very much appreciate that.
Totally.
Thank you so much. And so the idea was that digital is temporary, print is forever. So there are no digital copies of the comic. It's only print edition. Cool. But we wanted to kind of get it out there and let people see it and help crowdfund. So a chapter per week came to people, and then each week a new one came, and the last one was destroyed. So as we were doing that, it was interesting to see kind of people's reactions. And one of the reactions from my dad was, I'm waiting to know what the apocalypse is. And I said, well, Dad, you can go outside and look and see what we're dealing with now. So yeah, that was the kind of the underlying message of it, is that we're living in a apocalypse. And for the record, I didn't want to create this story that was completely going to make people feel hopeless. Right. I know that maybe some of us sometimes feel a lack of hope in the world, but no, it was actually to inspire and also be aware of what's happening around us, because I really do feel like plants are going to help us no matter what happens in our future. No matter what, they're going to have us, and we're going to be able to connect with them, and they're going to support us in our journey. So that was kind of the underlying tone. But yeah, we're dealing with species extinction, habitat loss, climate change, the list goes on. And so to really just put that in perspective, and then, but in the story, the situation is a bit more dire than it is now, but I don't know, we'll see what happens, but who knows, it could enter into that kind of thing in the future.
Just a quick break from the show to thank our presenting sponsor, Oshala Farm. Oshala Farm is a beautiful and vibrant certified organic herb farm based in Southern Oregon, where they grow and sell over 80 different plant species. The founders, Elise and Jeff Higley, have been longtime friends, so I highly trust their growing methods and ethics. You'll love the potency and vibrancy of all the herbs they have to offer. To learn more and purchase their herbs and other organic goods, head to oshalafarm.com. So thanks once again to Oshala Farm for sponsoring the Herbalist Hour. Now back to the show. Enjoy. Totally. Yeah, I kept wanting to ask a question about, like, say, the end, but I don't want to give any, like, say, spoilers or anything like that. So I'm very curious. It's a beautiful graphic novel. We got to, shout out the artist. And I'm curious who the artist is and how you two met and kind of collaborated on this project.
Yes, Rokaya Taki is the illustrator, and she is immensely talented, and I feel forever grateful to have worked with her. I'd love to work with her again. She's an independent artist from Cairo, Egypt, and the whole process started right before the pandemic, actually, of writing the graphic novel. And so when I was deciding, okay, yes, I'm going to do this crazy thing and make a graphic novel, I put an ad out, or a job description on Upwork. And I said, this is what the project is, and I need someone who's open-minded and into radical concepts and interested in plants. And I had this whole criteria. And I actually found another artist, and I really loved her work. It was very kind of psychedelic and botanical. And I said, okay, I'm going to collect my ideas and my thoughts and make it back to you. Well, that ended up taking a lot longer than I'd initially thought. So by the time I got back to her, she said, I'm sorry, the pandemic had hit, and she said, I have full-time work and I have no time at all. So I can't take on another project. And I was really sad. And I said, okay, because I really liked her stuff. And I knew I wanted it to be a woman, because I wanted this to be a women-created graphic novel. For various reasons that we can get into later if we want. But so I put the call out again, and then I saw Rokaya's art, and I was immediately enchanted and in love. And I said her, because she has a very kind of dark horror art style, which really spoke to me. And then because the theme of kind of an underlying theme of the story of the tale is that it's kind of a zine look and a very 90s kind of old school vibe. So when I saw her work, I knew that it'd be perfect. And so we started the process, and it would be hard to believe, but I will tell you that Rokaya had never really drawn botanical art before.
Wow.
But yeah, she excels, and she is super talented and goes above and beyond. And so we would start, and I would write the script. So I would say, panel 1, this is what happens. This is the dialogue. And so I would send her the script, and then she takes that and then she constructs it in a way that she visualizes it and creates it. So, she might make panel 1 a lot longer because she wants to show that they're in a field of wildflowers. And then this one, she would know she needs to make smaller. So she took all of that on, and she excelled with the whole way through. And yeah, she's amazing, and I'm really excited to see where she goes in the future as well.
Heck yeah. Well, yeah, just looking at it, it does remind me of, like, say, the comic books I used to read back in the day. I love that the herbal community has like a graphic novel. That's so sweet. I would have never thought of that. It does look like a true labor of love from the both of you. And yeah, I would have never guessed that she'd never really done botanical drawings before, because each one is just so detailed and beautiful. And just kind of curious, how long did the process take from idea inception all the way to completion? Because this just seemed like, yeah, like a huge undertaking.
It was definitely. So the actual drawing process, Rokai and I sitting there working on it and going through it, was just over 2 years. Now, the idea started probably 3, almost 4 years before that, and the graphic novel and things like that, because it started out as this nagging idea. I got this idea. It was called Herbs for the Apocalypse. The title came very early on. The main character's name was Sophia. This was kind of her vibe. This is how she was. And another interesting point that I like to bring up is that her character was a punk rocker. Now, and so I started listening to a lot of punk rock music. I started studying the punk rock movement, what it meant, read many different books about the topic, listened to a ton of main bands, went down many rabbit holes. And I'm a music aficionado, but I never was totally devoted to punk. I wasn't well versed in that genre, but then through the story, it actually got me into it. And so she kind of inspired me to become more into that line of work as well, or that type of music as well. So I've heard people say that this story kind of takes on a life of its own, and that's very true. I was just at one point just a conduit, like, okay, here I go. I don't know where we're going, but I'm just going to facilitate the movement.
Do you throw punk music into your rotation these days, or was that just
Definitely.
kind of more of a really? Where should we start if we wanted to, listen to some of what Sophia listens to?
Well, actually, there's a soundtrack for Herbs of the Apocalypse soundtrack that's on Spotify. And then if you go to the Herbs of the Apocalypse website, it's going to be on the main page there. And so I wanted to incorporate different parts of the punk rock movement, because there are so many different subgenres and different types. And I also threw in psych rock. It's sort of debatable, but I kind of see punk rock coming out of psych rock eventually, and some people would say no, and some people whatever. I'm not going to get in the debate, but what inspired me about the story was kind of the pushing the edge, the avant-garde, the crunchy, grimy part of music that initially was making people want to run away scared, that kind of thing. So, and breaking the boundaries of what is music. For example, psych rock was going way longer in their songs, 10 minutes, even reaching 16 minutes. And people were saying, what is this? I cannot even imagine. And then punk rock came along and it was 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Breaking everything down to really concise, small, short songs. And just, yeah, so I might say start there. And you'll go down your own rabbit holes after that.
Is I want to just from memory, is it Bitch Fist? Is that a real band?
No, so Bitch Fist is not a real band, but I will say it's modeled after a real band, 7 Year Bitch, which is actually an all chick grunge rock band that my friend Valerie was in the 90s in Seattle. And so actually I ended up doing a series of interviews with Valerie to kind of ask her about what was it like back then and explain to me a bit. So the character of Lilith is strongly modeled after some of the chick rockers that I know.
Well, I interviewed the owner of Mountain Rose Herbs, like, I don't know, a few months back, and he was strong into the punk scene, and he was talking about the smelly boots. And I know there's a part in the story where the dude at the record shop has really smelly boots or something like that. So I'd say you got the scene dialed in. I know there's also like shout outs to, say, analog audio culture and whatnot. Do you partake in, say, cassette collection or records or anything like that, or is that more just kind of displaying the punk rock scene at the time?
That was definitely more of a display. I'd say these days I have surrendered to the digital world.
Totally.
But I do try to keep the analog vibe going. I do, for example, try to write out things on with pen and paper as much as possible. I turn off, if I have vacation time, I turn off my phone. I am a week offline, no phone, no computer. I try, if I can, to use Google Maps and then be able to form my own path. But that was more of getting into the whole vibe of the scene. And in the story, Sophia is a complete and total Luddite. She hates technology. She doesn't have a cell phone. She rides a bike. She just didn't want any part of all of that. And you can see in the story that there's the kind of problem with the digital age and how someone like her, there are older people that perhaps don't have the internet. I met one recently. She was 94 years old. She didn't have a cell phone. She never went on the internet. She had never been online in her life. And I said, respect to you.
We were just at a wedding on Friday Harbor in Washington, and we met a really neat older woman there. She was like hula hooping on stage and stuff like that. And we caught her on the ferry back, and she's like, can you please send me that picture that you took of us? Because my wife did all the photography for the wedding. And no internet, no cell phone. So we're having to, do a handwritten letter with a physical printed copy of the picture too. And I'm just like, she just seemed like such a joyous, amazing, happy human being. And maybe there is something to that. So you brought up earlier that it was important to you that it was a woman created project. And then you said we could talk about that if you want. So yeah, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So full disclosure, growing up, actually, the big comic nerd was my brother. I started reading comics when later in life. And I remember Persepolis was one that was really stood out to me. And a lot of the comics that are popular or that people love, and I'm not going to knock what anyone else likes, but they're superhero based. I'm going to just go out and say it, that a lot of the women depicted in the comic book world, it's not written for me. Right. It's not written for women. It's written through the male gaze. And so I never saw myself in any of the women characters. And so Persepolis would be an exception. So that was the first time I saw it was a woman. She illustrated it and wrote it, which is exceptional. And I thought, wow, I really love the way that weave the story and create a visual imagery that you can offer people as well. So, when I had the idea to do the graphic novel, I said, all right, I feel like because of the nature of the story and the nature of the main character and the characters in general, it's very women empowered characters. I wanted to have a woman create it because I wanted a woman to be able to depict women appropriately, and for example, the way that women's bodies are drawn, I wanted that to be something that people could relate to and not be fake, like a lot of the women's bodies I see in comic books. Right. And so also I feel like this is kind of an issue in stories in general, so in fiction stories, but the way that women are depicted, it's not something I relate to. I feel like we need a lot more inspiring women characters out there, and especially women that are provocative, that criticize the status quo, that aren't quiet, that won't be silenced. And so that was what I was creating with that, with the story. And then Rokai was perfect. She just totally had it in spades. And so I think that, still I would like to see more graphic novels created, developed for women by people of color. There are many different independent artists that are working on this now. And I appreciate seeing that, because I think we're seeing now in the arts in general, we're seeing more diversity. And I'm so grateful for that, because it's time. It's really time for us to be telling different stories, to be listening to the things that it's boring to always have the same narrative, the same stories. And so I just wanted to try to create something different and to hopefully inspire others to do the same, because I would inspire anybody who says that they have an idea and it's maybe, not typical, or other people have criticized it. I'd say just keep going, because the world needs to hear what you have to say.
Amen. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It does seem like times are changing, and we do see a lot more diversity in, say, modern pop culture and stuff. For whatever reason, Squid Game came to mind. We watched that like a couple years ago, and it was nice to not just see like your typical just white male as like the lead or whatever. So it just appears that we're getting more and more diversity all over the place, and including our graphic novels. So Sarah, do you mind if I read the dandelion monologue, or is that
By all
chill?
means.
Awesome. Yeah, I just adore all of these. And again, if you're watching, I'll have to turn this around. How do we do this?
Yeah, you can see it.
Yeah. So here we go. So this is the dandelion monologue, read by Mason Hutchison, written by Sarah Russo. Presumably that was you, right? That wrote this?
Yes.
Awesome. Be careful what you call a weed. I'm the bane of a gardener's existence. I occupy yards like squatters in an abandoned building on the verge of gentrification. They would be less likely to destroy me if they knew I am one of the most nutritious vegetables on the planet. The same flower people use to wish for their deepest desires is the one they rid from the ground by the medicinal roots. Next time, remember my seeds are winged messengers. Many shepherds have used me as a clock to mark the passing of time. My flowers unfurl after sunrise and close up in the early evening. My seeds stay withdrawn during rain, but reach towards the clear sky. My flower never stays open once I'm removed from my stalk. You can't chain me down. I'm a bit bitter about the whole thing. I grow in abundance because, no offense, humans are incredibly toxic. I live in squalor, a war zone that renders most of the plants unable to flourish, but I am able to see the beauty of my surroundings. I find what is harmful, encapsulate it, and dispose of it. We're in the front lines fighting against toxicity. I'm a lawn activist chaining myself to my turf. I might even outlive those who wish to destroy me. We form strong bonds in order to flourish. Perhaps I scream a bit too loud, but you aren't listening. We even try to increase our numbers, but our medicine continues to be ignored. Divide and conquer doesn't work. It's time for me to bring in reinforcements. Dandelion. And there's as you said, there's 10 of these throughout the graphic novel.
Yes.
All beautifully illustrated, and it's like poetry, which is probably what you were going for there.
Yeah, I wanted to bring out the poetic side of things. Actually, one of the critiques I got when the story was a novel was that I was too writerly. Huh. And I mean, to me, it's a reflection of the fast-paced world that we live in now. Everything needs to be more concise, and you need to say what you're going to say in 3 words. I want to say it in 5 words, So to get a little bit more flowery and kind of embellish a bit. And the dandelion was definitely the most sassy of the voices.
Yeah, as I was reading it, I kind of felt like those monologues were almost like markings of chapters for the book. I don't know if that's what you were going for or not, but
yes, I was.
Totally. Well, anything else you'd like to say? Are there still copies to purchase of the graphic novel? Can folks still buy it?
Yes, so we are doing a limited edition run, one run only, 300 copies. Each one is hand numbered, and only in print. And so they are available. It's been interesting to see kind of who ends up with a copy. And I'm finding it's connecting me with some really amazing people. So yes, if you're interested, you can go to the Herbs for the Apocalypse website and click on order, and there's instructions there.
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah. And I'm honored to have edition 263. And I know I have another one, so it's probably 264 upstairs. But actually, I want to gift one to the owner of Mountain Rose Herbs. I think he'd really dig it because he likes herbs and punk rock. So,
Oh, yeah.
yeah. Well, why don't we transition over to, you were suggesting pre-call that maybe we talk about entheogens. So I know you have a background in cannabis, but what's going on with you in entheogens, aka psychedelics?
Well, yes, I'd say that cannabis was kind of my introduction into another realm of plant study. And I think that she's also one of the herbs for the apocalypse. She's the first herb to appear. Actually, the first herb and the last herb are both psychoactive plants. And I'll say psychoactivity. We can talk about psychoactivity in a second because it's a spectrum for sure. But she kind of opened my world to see, wow, I can look at things in a different way, change my perspective. I began my activism when I was 17, and it was basically in my town creating cannabis as the lowest law enforcement priority. And then kind of from there, I started working in the cannabis movement surrounding education. So offering educational information about the plant. And now it's expanded into this whole big industry, which is really wild to see. And so I think that she opened my eyes to a lot of different ways of seeing. And I think that she does that for us collectively as far as our evolution right now. And so as the laws are changing involving her, we're also seeing a different perspective and a decreasing stigma in the way we're seeing other plant medicines, other entheogens or psychedelics. And that wouldn't necessarily all be based on plants. It could be based on fungal partners that we have, the mushroom family. And then animal medicine as well is something that some people work with. And so my activism with cannabis kind of led me into the activism with different plant medicines as well. And having worked with different plant medicines throughout my life and being very grateful for the insights that they've given me over time, and seeing the potential that they can offer humanity, I think is beautiful and surprising again to see where we're at now versus 20 years ago and the way things are changing. I mean, we still have a lot more work to do. And, I will say there's still a massive injustice throughout the world for people that are put in prison. In certain places, they're put to death for plants. And that should not be. And I will do my hardest in this lifetime to seek justice in that. Because I think once we can liberate plants, we can liberate ourselves, because really the kind of injustice that we see and the projection we put on plants is just a reflection of the way we view ourselves, and a lack of understanding and a lack of compassion and a disconnection from nature. So I think we need to heal that. And I think that psychedelic medicines of different capacities can help us do that.
Absolutely. So do you do any work with psilocybin at all?
Yes, I do. I, from time to time, will have an experience with psilocybin, a full-on experience. And then sometimes I do microdose as well. I have really severe headaches from time to time. When I was a kid, I would have migraines. And some people might define what I have now as a migraine, but I remember what migraines were in the past and what they are now. But regardless of what they are, they're very painful. And I know anyone who's had a severe headache or a migraine really knows how troublesome they are and how detrimental they can be to your life. And I've noticed, because generally speaking, I try to avoid taking ibuprofen and things like that if possible. Now, sometimes nothing helps and I just say, screw it, I'm going to I need to feel better, and ibuprofen works. Sometimes ibuprofen doesn't work. I have that happen to me sometimes. But I did notice that, I heard about microdosing psilocybin and also LSD. I haven't microdosed it for that purpose, but psilocybin I have found to be effective for my headaches about 70% of the time, which for me is great because that's 70% when I don't need to take ibuprofen. And also it helps expand my perception and makes everything feel a bit more aligned. And so I think that microdosing psilocybin can be really beneficial for many things.
Yeah. I've taken it recently, and I just always come away, if I, get new insights, or basically what usually happens for me is I'm reminded of the actual important things in life. Like, we get so caught up in the day-to-day stress. I got to do this, I got to do that. But I notice when I experiment or take psilocybin, it just really recenters me and makes me remember like the important things in life. And it's usually just like this really overwhelming sense of love. Granted, I feel like on the podcast, I got to say, do your research. It's not for everybody. This is not like medical advice or anything like that. And in my earlier years, I would take it like almost recreationally or whatever. Probably not the best way to go about using such a strong substance. But then, yeah, microdosing is also definitely a good way to, try to incorporate it into the regimen as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And mushrooms in and of themselves are complete and total world. That's fascinating.
Totally.
It's very exciting to see how things are shifting in that as well. And I do want to say also that I find it to be interesting, and this is some kind of a process I've been in as well, as kind of the tendency these days to gravitate towards what's natural. So say psilocybin containing mushrooms or plant medicines, ayahuasca, San Pedro, cannabis, these plants that naturally contain certain compounds that cause psychoactive effects. But, there are other medicines that aren't natural, but they can alter our perception and be medicinal as well. So I find it to be interesting that there's this kind of division between the natural world and the unnatural world.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's a place for all of these medicines. Some people might really gravitate towards something that's completely natural, 100% from the earth. I understand that. And I also think it's interesting to think about like what a single compound can do. For example, LSD. Yeah. That compound alone in and of itself has revolutionized many parts of our life. And so to think about it like that came from ergot, which is a fungus that grows on wheat. And so, or rye, it grows on rye, or it could probably grow on wheat too, but I'd have to check that.
I didn't know that. Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know that it came from a fungus.
Yeah, it does. And so that's how they originally found it and synthesized it. And so I think it's really common these days in the world of even plant medicine to think about active compounds, right? So, what's the active compound in wormwood? It's thujone. So everyone's very interested in this one active compound, right? But what else does it have going on? A million things. I mean, this is a plant, and we don't even know how to study and understand all the compounds that exist in one plant. And that's just one variety. Think about all the other varieties that exist out there, the growing conditions and how that affects it. And so I think that modern science is really obsessed with this one thing. They want to find the one active medicinal part of this plant, take it and make money off of it, or develop different medicines based on that one thing. And it's also very hard to study plant synergy. Plant synergy is incredibly complex. And so we don't really know anything. So people aren't going to want to devote the money and resources to something that's very cost effective, right? So a lot of these plants are very easy to obtain. You can grow them yourself. They give you a large quantity of medicine. And so oh, well, no, that's not good enough. We need to have the active component. And so I think that it's doing us a disservice to really focus on the medicinal uses of plants and the medicinal compounds. I mean, I find it to be interesting and fascinating. I love to geek out with, especially people that are very scientifically focused and talk about what compounds do what inside of the plant and what plants share compounds with other plants. That's fascinating to me. But I think that the medicine is in the whole plant. Yeah. So I hope that as things are changing, that we don't see legislation that really gravitates towards legalizing this compound or the pharmaceuticalization of these medicines, because that's going to be detrimental from my perspective.
Yeah, you're saying, are you saying you would like to see more and more legalization of, say, psilocybin, not necessarily LSD or whatever, some drug compound? Are you saying you want to see like legalization of the whole plant or whole mushroom?
I would like to see legalization across the board. So legalize all drugs.
Yeah.
And then, that would give us the ability to study all things in greater depth. Because personally, I feel like the drug laws are more harmful than the drugs themselves. And also, what is a drug?
Right.
Sugar is a drug. Coffee is a drug.
Right.
A lot of other things that we do on a daily basis can be considered drugs. So why are we saying that this plant, because it has certain properties, or maybe we don't understand it, is bad and we shouldn't use it? Well, that should be up to the individual to decide. And do I think that we should all go out and just pick a bunch of plants and take them and see what happens? No. Right. But I do feel like we need to have a kind of a reconnection to these plants to understand, like, this plant, and teach our kids, this plant, you don't touch this. No, this is not for you to ingest. You just look at it. Or, eventually when you're older, maybe you can work with this, things like that, to be more transparent. And I think a lot of this lack of understanding comes from a disconnection. For example, in the global north, in the cultures of the global north, very disconnected from plant medicine. But a lot of cultures in other parts of the world are still very much connected to plant medicine. So it's unfortunate that a lot of the places that are most disconnected are the ones that are governing international laws. So that's a disservice to all of us. So why is it that one place or a group of countries are forming these decisions for the whole rest of the world when they have no context of how these things work? I mean, the lawmakers, they don't know how plants work. They don't understand. And so we want to educate them and help them make informed decisions, and so that they can create laws that actually serve us.
That's brilliant. I love how you put all that. It seems like a nice segue to talk about the nightshade family. I know you got some things to say about nightshades as well.
Yeah, I should say a couple of years ago, became very interested in the nightshade family. Because, tomatoes, peppers, things like that, I've been familiar with for a long time. And I actually don't really eat them. I like tomato sauce, but it really is very acidic for me. And so I don't really eat them much. But I started looking into other types of nightshades, and it's a big world, a huge world, actually. Tobacco, for example, is a nightshade. And that's a plant that I have a lot of respect for. I only work with tobacco in ceremony. I don't smoke it for fun, and I find that the effects are really, really strong for me. So I feel like I'm very sensitive to the nightshade family. But then there's other plants like Brugmansia, which is a plant that I adore. Another herbal tattoo I have is Brugmansia.
I'll have to look that up. I've never heard of that one.
Trumpet flower, you may have
trumpet
also.
flower.
Yeah. And so I became very enchanted with that plant when I was in South America. And also when I lived in California, I saw that it's an ornamental plant. So actually this plant, they say, is not really out in the wild anymore. It's been kind of whatever it's called when it domesticated. Oh, yeah. And so now it's really hard to find wild sources of this plant. But at one time it was. And there's a lot of lore surrounding the plant that I find to be interesting. It's connected with death. So a lot of these plants, belladonna, datura, mandrake, There are a lot of different, henbane is another plant that's very interesting. All of these plants have a very rich history, and they're mostly associated with death because they can kill us. They really can. I mean, if you take too much of any of these plants, you're dead. And so it brings into the idea of what is a medicine, right? Because the difference between a medicine poison is dose. So I feel like the nightshade family really shows us that. And for example, with Brugmansia, it's bad luck to bring in more than one flower. You wouldn't want to take a bouquet of Brugmansia flowers and bring it into your house. It's said to be very bad luck. And as I have Brugmansia growing on my terrace. And once I started having it and growing it, I started to understand it in a different way. Wow, I understand that plant is super seductive. And the flowers are stunning and the smell is intoxicating and it opens at, has more of aroma at night. So I found myself almost being seduced by this plant.
Wow.
And so you can see how it would be seductive and seduce you into death. And, you know, people, you can have just one flower and bring that in. And I put it in a glass of water and have it on my nightstand. And it helps give me crazy dreams at night. So that's one way you can work with these plants. You don't even have to ingest it. You can just be around them, you know, and people take them homeopathically, which I find to be very interesting, but it's another kind of level because handling them, for example, belladonna has these gorgeous berries that are bright purple, almost black purple. But if you have a little bit of that, the juice from the berries, and you put that in your eye, it can send you to the hospital.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, you know, it's not to be taken lightly. But I found that they're just such a beautiful inspiration in a lot of different ways that we can and look at how our relationship is to these plants, right? Because again, we're going back to the laws and the disconnection from nature, you know, because a lot of the Solanaceae, the nightshade family, they are poisonous, but then tomatoes, potatoes, peppers, we eat that all the time. Tobacco is one of the most widely available drugs on the planet. So why are those okay? And these other ones, I mean, all of the plants that I mentioned in the Solanaceae family generally are legal, but those are legal, but they can kill you. And then these other plants that can't kill you aren't legal. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I mean, isn't like, say, Datura used by some individuals as like a psychoactive, or am I thinking of something else?
Yeah, I think there are people on the internet and there are forums of people on Arrowwood and things like that have had experiences with Datura. I personally never have. I personally never would.
Yeah, me neither.
I don't feel called to it. It's a dissociative. I don't feel the need to dissociate, but I'm not going to judge anyone's decision. But what I would say is make sure you are completely informed.
Yeah.
And medicine, poison, dose.
Right. Because
I don't even know where to begin with dosing it for internal use.
Yeah.
So you would have to have someone who's very well informed about these topics, that had worked with it before, that was able to give you a safe extraction, or you were able to do a safe extraction. So for me, there are too many variables involved. So I wouldn't personally take it internally at all. Some of these plants, there's actually the history of the flying ointment, which was used by witches to fly and to have these psychoactive journeys when they were doing ritual work. And a lot of them have the Solanaceae family in them. And putting those on a pulse point, you make a salve and you put those on a pulse point, and that's enough to take you on a voyage. So you don't even that in of itself, if you get that in your mouth or in an area where you shouldn't, it could be detrimental. So you got to be very, very careful with these plants. And it's not a joke. It's not something to just casually decide, oh yeah. I mean, if you can, but at your own risk, I wouldn't advise it.
Same. Yeah. I love that you just emphasize it's medicine enough to hang out with the plant. You don't have to consume these plants. You could, just hang out with it, get the energy and beauty that way.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's also very common in Western culture to think about taking. We do a lot of work around, ooh, I want to take that plant.
Right.
I see a bunch of wild yarrow, I want to take it home with me. And the idea of possession and owning it, but sometimes we can just witness and just like be a part, because I like to think of them as allies to us, and allies, they have their own existence, they have their own world, and we're sharing the same world with them. So to kind of be in service to that and to sit and just listen. I ended up doing a lot of sitting with a lot of the herbs of the apocalypse when I was writing the story. And, you know, some of these plants that I'd been with my whole life, like rose, I remember I sat down in front of a rose bush that I had at the time, and I was just sitting there, just seeing what came to me, if anything, or just to be around it, to be in Rose's presence. And I think that that's helpful. I want to be able to do that more.
Yeah, I want to say my teacher Howie Brownstein calls it herbalist, and he says something like, "The hard part isn't harvesting the plant; the hard part is not harvesting the plant," which I always really like that saying. Awesome. Well, it's been about an hour. Do you got a few more minutes to do a couple more questions?
Definitely.
Awesome. We've been trying out this new segment called "Explain That Gram," and we stole it from a YouTube show called Hot Ones. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you an Instagram picture from your Herbs for the Apocalypse Instagram account, and you could kind of just tell the greater story of what's going on there. So I'm going to hit share screen. What's going on here, Sarah?
So that is at the Hash and Marijuana Museum in Barcelona, which is near where I live. And that was when we had a group of international delegates coming to learn about the cannabis social club model in Catalonia, Spain, which is where Barcelona is. It's a region of Spain that has its own language, Catalan, and its own history and its own culture. And so there's a really interesting model of providing cannabis there. And so this was looking at the different artifacts in the museum. And this was the ancient pipes section. And I just was fascinated by it. And a photographer was there, and she took that photo. And then I wanted to talk about cannabis because as much as I think that in the cannabis world, people are very fixated on cannabis, and they need to kind of, in my opinion, branch out a little bit more and integrate other plants into their world. I feel like herbalists are really interested in cannabis, and she's just part of the repertoire. So that's how I see her. I see her as part of the allyship and part of the kind of army, for lack of a better term, that we have to help us through everything that's going on right now. And then at the same time, I will acknowledge her as a muse. I mean, she completely transformed my life, and she continues to transform my life. And it's not even me necessarily ingesting her and then the realizations I come to. It's the story that she's sharing with us. And I these are lessons passed down from generations. And I think that the plants help share their story with us over time, because we've turned to her for millennia. And I like to think we'll continue to. So that was kind of what I was going with that there.
Love that. Yeah, it's pretty fun to see these ancient cannabis smoking tools. Love it.
Yeah, there's some beautiful ones. I'd love to have a couple of them in my
that'd
collection.
be amazing.
Yeah.
I'll do one more. I just wanted to know the story behind this one. Who's this?
This is my friend Mary Peña. She is a Colombian doctor that lives in Barcelona, a good friend of mine. And I was really happy about how this project connected me with such beautiful people. I knew Mary before, but Mary heard about the project, and she really resonated with her a lot. And so she really loved it, and she's amazing. She works with different types of medicines, and is really funny and great, and one of my dearest friends. I love her incredibly so. And so the comic really spoke to different people in different realms and different backgrounds. And so Once we published the comic, I was so happy to have it in the hands of people who were very excited about it. And I would say Mary might be the number one fan of Herbs for the Apocalypse. She's the best fangirl ever. And awesome. She's fangirls for a lot of different things. And if you ever have the ability to have her as a fangirl, I recommend.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
She's got a great smile. She looks super happy right there. I love it.
Yeah, she was. And she loves the music. She's into
cool.
punk rock. She's into punk rock as well. So
well, she must have really loved it then. Awesome. Well, it's been great getting to know you. Like we were saying pre-call, this is our actual first chat. We've had a lot of email correspondence over the years, but I guess I'll wrap it up with just saying what's next for Sarah, and any closing thoughts.
What's next? That's a good question.
Sounds like you're chilling now.
Yeah. Since we published the graphic novel, initially I thought, wow, when it's published, I'm going to want to promote it and tell the world about it. And honestly, I published it and I just was kind of in awe that it even got finished, and just grateful that it was done and we got it into the hands of the people that had supported us over the process, including you. And thank you so much again for all the support that HerbRally has given the project. And so I haven't really done a whole lot with it as far as the project. Now, the project is a source of inspiration for people to kind of do it themselves and connect with plant medicine, because that's ultimately the goal, is for people to reconnect to plants and to kind of take the whole to demystify plant medicine as well, because it's kind of common to see it like, oh, this expert in plants. Well, we can all be experts, and we all kind of are, in and of itself, because we drink chamomile tea, and any one of us, there's no elitism in it at all. What do you have to say about this? How does it taste? What are the effects that you feel? So to kind of take the hierarchy out of it as well. And that we're all perpetual students. I will always forever be learning. And one of the things I'm learning about now is actually a lot of the magical history of plants. I'm very interested in that. And so recently I was in England and I went to Cornwall, and there was the Witchcraft and Magic Museum, and they had this wall of different plants, and they were talking about the magical uses of all these plants. And so that's something I've been very interested in recently. So I do something called night studies. I have a really massive collection of new books. It's a little bit ridiculous, the weight of them, because I like old-fashioned books. I don't like to read on screens. And so since I've been back, I've been doing some night studies and turning off my phone around 11 at night and just going analog and reading about them. So I'd say that's taking up a lot of my interest right now as far as my personal journey. And in my day-to-day, I'm a editor and a writer. I work on the communications team for an organization called iSears. And we focus on looking at the globalization of plant medicine and trying to help facilitate more positive connection with these plants and helping support the people who have historically carried their knowledge. And so in my day-to-day, I work on different educational materials that help people learn about these topics. And so education has always been a big part of my work with plants. And so that's something I will continue, I think, for the rest of my life.
Yeah, you said something earlier about we don't really know anything. And that's kind of something that keeps me humble and always wanting to learn, and try not to be too rigid in what I believe, because I feel like every time I start to become so rigid in something, someone changes my mind or says something in a new way, or I could see how you could see it both ways and whatnot. And I just really want to thank you, Sarah, for coming on the show. You brought so much knowledge. Like I could just listen to you talk all day. I bet you've got a lot more to say about all these different subjects that we had. So I'm really excited to see what's next for you. I think you got another book in you. Maybe a nonfiction book even. It would be really fascinating to hear what Sarah has to say with a lot of these condensed learnings that you're taking. And your day job sounds pretty cool too.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm blessed.
Amen.
For sure.
Well, thanks once again for coming on the show, and we'll have to have you back sometime in the future. And thanks y'all for listening / watching, and we'll see you in the next episode of the Herbalist Hour.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much for watching today's episode of the Herbalist Hour. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. And if you want more great herbal content, be sure to subscribe to our HerbRally YouTube channel. If you enjoy these Herbalist Hour episodes and you'd like to join us live, you can do so by becoming an HerbRally Schoolhouse member. Learn more at herbally.com/schoolhouse. And if you want to get your first 30 days for free, use coupon code YouTube30 at checkout. So our HerbRally Schoolhouse members get access to exclusive video classes, monographs, and a lot more herbal community discounts, along with joining these live Herbalist Hour interviews. So one more time, herbally.com/schoolhouse. Enter coupon code YouTube30 at checkout to get your first 30 days for free. All right, we'll see you in the next episode, and take care.